Hello and welcome. My name is Rob Brayton, and I'm here to walk you through an introduction to the infinite banking concept. Now, you've probably not found this video by any accident. Someone likely gave you the link so that you could get an intro to the infinite banking concept really consists of and how it applies to our day-to-day lives. Today, we're going to walk through that together. And to get started, we're going to walk through an introduction. I'm going to walk you through some of my introduction to the infinite banking concept, how I got here today, being able to share this with you. And then from there, we'll go through and we're going to talk in more specifics, starting with how you think. We're going to look at some of the problems and principles that exist in our day-to-day lives. And then lastly, we're going to talk about that solution and how it directly applies to you and your situation. So let me give you some background about my story. I got into finance at a relatively young age. I started looking at things from a financial perspective, even as far back as maybe 8 years old. However, my understanding of the money system just wasn't much better than the average person's in all reality. And my parents were very well intentioned and talked about paying yourself first and a lot of these good principles. However, the avenues in which to actually do that were a little bit challenging. I didn't understand what they were. So I went in and started doing a lot of my own research, and I did all the normal things. I started a Roth IRA when I was about 20 years old. As I moved into the corporate world, as I was getting out of my late 20s and into my 30s, was doing the 401ks, doing the emergency funds, paying down debt, all of the things that the conventional financial system would tell you to do is the right thing. And as I was doing so, I couldn't help, as I was getting closer to my 40s, realizing that there's something more and I'm missing something because there's been so much money each year that's been flowing through my hands. I've been doing the right things, saving a good portion of my money, but yet something's missing. It felt like something was off. And so I really just laid my heart open before the Lord and asked for some guidance. And it was shortly thereafter that I came upon one of my mentors, Luke Tatum, who wrote the book Between the Lies, which was an excellent read and really helped connect the dots of all the things I had actually been thinking and feeling up to that point. And he had pointed me to Becoming Your Own Banker. And that's the book by R. Nelson Nash that the infinite banking concept is structured around. So it's with that and learning through that process that I knew I was in the right place. And that's what kind of kicked off my journey. That process worked so well for me and my family that I truly felt called to step into the space to be able to help other people find that same missing link, so to speak, in their financial future, and do so in a way that allows them to build a strong foundation, not only with their finances, but also with faith and family, and then building that future legacy in the process. So with that, that's a lot of my why and why I like to do this and help other people. So let's talk a little bit more about this process and get into it. So I'd like to start today with a little play on words, but hopefully it'll get your mind going a little bit. And we can see this simple sentence on the screen. It's pretty straightforward, right? It's all about how you think. Well, I can change what that means to you simply by emphasizing a different word of the sentence in a couple of different ways. It's all about how you think. It's all about how you think. It's all about how you think. Today, you're going to learn and see something from perhaps a different angle that maybe you're not familiar with, but once your eyes are open to it, you'll have the option to do something with that information. You can either choose to learn more and seek out more information, or you can choose to ignore it. In either case, the choice is yours. But before we get there, I'd like to ask you a little bit lighter question, so to speak. And that is, how many sides of a coin are there? You're correct that most people would probably say two, but remember, it's all about how you think. There's actually three sides to a coin, and there's often the side that most people don't think about, the third side, and that is the edge. And it's the side that's often unseen or not thought about. And the main point to keep in mind here is that as we go through this information today, it's your thinking. Think about what, how, and why you think the way you do. I want to challenge you to avoid interpreting what you hear through your existing filters, particularly those filters of traditional finance. Challenge yourself to think openly. If you immediately feel emotion to a particular issue or an area that's discussed, pause, take a second and think, what is causing that? Why am I feeling that in this particular situation? As we get started, many people are seeking solutions. And most of the time, the problems that they're seeking these solutions to are in fact symptoms of a greater problem. It's often that we're not seeking out that root cause problem. So, and those symptoms can include not enough income, too many expenses, how am I going to pay my payroll, where's my cash flow at in my business, feeling like you should be further ahead than what you are in your day-to-day financial life. These are all symptoms and not the actual problem. So let's take a minute and let's explore what that problem really is. So we're going to take a look at some problems and principles here. And we're going to first dive into the fundamental money problem. And that is that every dollar that flows into your hands has a problem. And it can either be put to work so it can grow, or it can be spent and lost forever. Now, it really is the fundamental money problem. And it's that problem that every dollar that you ever earn has. Most conventional strategies don't attempt to solve this fundamental money problem. The conventional approaches suggest to try to save what's left over after all those expenses have been paid for and all that has flowed through your hands. And then what you do save, they recommend to lock away forever. Well, maybe not forever, but they recommend to lock it away in some sort of a qualified plan or for retirement. And there's really little to no access in those particular situations. You just don't have access to the money, but it's really about locking it away in hopes that it grows to a specific level so that you can enjoy it again someday. So again, this is really the conventional problem that exists, in that we have a trade-off. We can spend it and it's gone, or we can save it and lock it away. And that kind of leaves us in this lurch of, well, what do we truly do with our money? So when we think about how money gets to us in the form of income, there's really only two ways. And many of us are only taught one of these ways, and that is that it's working for income or trading time for money. The other item is having money at work. And most often we are not taught what this truly means or how this actually works. And in reality, most of us are taught that money at work is taking money, locking it away in a qualified plan or something along those lines, and then we can use it at some point in the future. That being said, let's talk about why money at work is really important. When we think about money and we think about the aspect of compounding, Albert Einstein is attributed with saying that compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. In many ways, he is very much right. Either money is working for you, or your money is being put to work in someone else's compounding system. So when Einstein is referring to compounding, what he's really meaning is uninterrupted compounding, meaning that your growth on your assets continues to add to the total growth of your system, and it only goes upward without stopping. Whenever there is an investment loss or any funds are removed or withdrawn from the system, compounding stops. And that means we give up interest that would have been earned. Regardless of being on paper or actually realized, that is what happens when there's a stock market loss. Or if you withdraw money for an automobile or a piece of property from your investments or your savings. The late Nelson Nash stated that everything in life is financed. We either give up interest we could have earned or pay interest to someone else. Stated another way, we're always borrowing. Whether when we spend money, we're spending money in cash, we are borrowing from our future self, or we could pay interest directly to somebody else. This point is extremely important to understand no matter what you take away from today. I can't stress enough how important it is to always keep in mind that everything in life is financed. So beyond the compounding, the other avenue is spending money. And I'd like to just ask you a quick question. Do you believe that when you spend cash, it's completely free, meaning there is no cost? So is there a cost to spending cash? Let's take a look at that cost. So let's say you're buying a used car for a child, or maybe you want to go on vacation or buy a camper with $10,000 and you spend that cash. Let's look at the cost of that purchase over time. So there's a difference between the price and the cost of an item. But sure, you get the item that you purchased, the car, the camper, the vacation. And let's say you could have put your money somewhere else, though, where it could earn 5% growth annually. In year one, you'd give up about $500 in interest. It doesn't seem like a lot. However, at the end of 10 years, that's nearly $6,300 in lost earned interest. At 20 years, it's $16,500 lost. At 30 years, spending that $10,000 actually cost you $33,200 in lost earned interest. So that is the cost of cash. That is the cost of not having money compounding for you. Now scale that across all your purchases. Scale that across all the cash purchases you make in a year. Now scale that out over 30 years. That is a major leak in your financial system, and one that's really difficult that if you don't have a system in place is really difficult to control. Hopefully you're starting to see where this challenge lies, that if we spend cash, it's gone forever and it can't be put to work, or if we lock money away for compounding, it becomes difficult to use. Now, it's also important that we view this from a slightly different angle. For normal day-to-day expenses and even large purchases like vehicles, many people choose to or are heavily influenced by a lot of popular financial entertainers to pay in cash because they think there's no cost, or they're saving on the interest that they would normally pay. Believe it or not, saving and paying cash or borrowing and taking a loan both tend to be a zero-sum game. On the top graph here, you can see that what happens when someone saves $5,000 a year for 5 years to buy a car. What happens to that balance in year 6? Well, we can see that it goes to zero, right? On the bottom graph, we assume that we take out a $25,000 loan and we make those repayments over the course of those 5 years. It too ends up at zero. So we're starting again at a point of zero. This just simply helps us to see that everything in life is financed. Now, some might say that we could have earned some interest on the money that we were saving, and that would be true. But it would, so maybe it doesn't go completely back to zero, but you would definitely impact the compounding that effect of that money. Now, believe it or not, in this same example, if somebody would have, if there was a CD that actually existed at 5% and you could have put the money there, you would have probably been better off to actually take a loan against that CD and use that towards the purchase of a vehicle, because at the end of it, you'd still have something left over. And the thing is, though, is that's well ahead of what anybody is teaching in the conventional financial world. It more often boils down to loans or cash. So that being said, let's continue on and talk more about this problem that exists. I like to call this modern approach to finance the conventional scenario. It's mainly because of how we're taught about the flow of money. This is a simplified version of what we said earlier. We spend money for our necessities. We go to banks for many financing needs: cars, homes, appliances, remodel projects, business startups, lines of credit for business, etc. And then after all of that is sorted, we save the rest by putting it at risk in the stock market or hoping it grows to the levels that we need to achieve the retirement dream of one day, someday. We're often taught conventionally that putting money to work is locking it away in that tax qualified plan. All the while, and so often in this conventional scenario, the average American and even a lot of our business owners are only ending up with, maybe 5% of the money saved, 10% of the money saved at the end of a year, while 90 to 95% of the money earned is gone forever, spent in cash, or it goes to banks in the form of interest. I assume most of you are familiar with an iceberg, and tying into our thinking, we're often concerned of only what's in front of us and not what may be below the surface. But what portion of an iceberg is actually under the water? Well, usually about 90% of it. So as I transition into some of the specific financial aspects of this discussion today, when we think about some of the problems facing the everyday American at a financial level, we often think about the items that are in our faces: rent, mortgage, credit cards, student loans, different types of bills from that perspective. But we're often not thinking below the surface at what's really happening in some of these things that we're participating in. So to do that, I want to look at a common family's financial situation. And the reason being is now more than ever, people feel like they're not making enough to reach their goals for the long run. And in many cases, it feels hopeless for them. So let's take a look at the problems or conventional thought and see why Americans are saving maybe at best about 4.5% of their income today. So in our example of the modern family, regardless of the numbers here, let's assume that this is you and that you make $150,000 after taxes. So we're going to say that you're a little better than average and you save maybe 6% of your income. And that's between your savings accounts, your 401ks, et cetera. Now, remember, the average American's only saving about 4.5% as of sometime here in 2026. So it's important to understand that this person's even doing a little bit better than the average. So in this scenario, we're going to talk about where the other 94% of a person's income is going to. So where are some of those leaks? And in our graph, we see it split up a few different ways. We have about 59% going to living expenses of some sort. This is food, this is clothing, etc., housing expense. And then we see 35% going to interest, and again, the 6% savings. Nelson Nash did a lot of thorough research in the book Becoming Your Own Banker, looking at the average American's financial situation. And what he found was that when we look at all the different aspects of debt service, so a credit card, student loan, auto loans, mortgage, etc., he found that about 35% of every after-tax dollar is going to interest or debt service of some sort. And I don't know about you, but that's a pretty substantial figure. And when most people take out a loan in these scenarios, what are they often thinking about? They're not thinking about what's the volume of interest. They're thinking about what is the payment, what is the interest rate, and for how long do I have to pay it? And it's those situations that we see, like that's what's in front of us. That's the top of the iceberg, but we're not thinking about what's below the surface. So what is highlighted in this particular graph is the volume of interest a person is paying regardless of the rate or the payment. And that is how much out of every payment is going to interest versus principal in those situations. So if you're skeptical about this, like I was initially, let's do a quick bit of trivia as we think about this volume of interest problem. So in the first 5 years of a 30-year mortgage with a 7% interest rate, how much of those payments do you think goes to interest? What percentage? Oftentimes many people will say, like, they know that it's more than the rate, but most people aren't aware that it's 85%. And that's pretty substantial. Now, you're probably thinking it's better with a lower rate, right? Well, most everyone's telling us get the lower rate interest because it's going to be a bigger impact for us. Well, what about a 30-year mortgage with a 3.5% rate? Surely it's got to be much better, right? Well, that turns out to be 62%. So it's still 62% of all of the payments in the first 5 years are going to interest on a 30-year mortgage. Some might say that if the term and the rate are lower, like a lot of popular financial entertainers say, that then it's got to be better, right? What about a 15-year with a 3.5% rate? Well, it is better, but it's still 35%. It's a far cry from that 3.5% that it claims on the note. You might surely think that auto loans are going to be a little bit better and you pay less than a mortgage, right? Well, yeah, you would be correct. But let's say you have an auto loan at a 5% rate, assuming you can get that. But on a 4-year loan, what is the volume percentage of interest paid? Well, over the course of those 4 years, it's 10.5%. So this is where that volume really comes into play and where we see that there's leaks within your financial system are occurring. So if you lose 35% of every dollar to interest when you borrow and you lose the future interest that you could have earned in cash or when you pay in cash, where does that leave us? It highlights a major problem that's really difficult for us to normally see. And what it tells us is that we need a different system for our money to operate in, where you're in control and where a high volume of your money can start earning and compounding for you, and you profit from the banking process, where you are the one who is in control of the money. And that's the big difference maker, is that this is something we are just not commonly taught. So let's move into our solutions. Now, it's going to take a second for us to get here because it's important to understand the context, but we are going to walk through this a little bit together. Now, you might be wondering how solving the problem is even possible in a scenario like this, since it's not often advertised or broadcasted that there is a solution. And what we're starting to see here is the lost cost of controlling the flow of money. And the truth is, we are all bankers. It's just that most of us have unknowingly outsourced that control and subsequently the profit to someone else. The conventional system has us believing that a bank is the best source of capital, and it fails to help anyone understand that all of us are bankers. The conventional system teaches you to be the borrower and the depositor only. However, there's actually 5 components to the banking process. When we take over the other positions of the banking process, the bank owner, the banker, and the lender, we can then begin to profit from the process. So if you're wondering why you're not aware, it's not really your fault since no one has taught you. It's hard to know what you don't know, and you can't do much about it. But then once you do, however, then the option is up to you to decide to do something different with that information. And quite honestly, that was the stark reality I faced over 3 years ago. Really, though, the solution is a process, and it's a simple one at that. It's creating a system that will allow consistent, repeatable success over time. It's simply changing where money flows first, and then through a system you own and control, really creating a foundation for your finances. Now, remember what I said earlier about not thinking through a filter? This is where it's really going to start to matter. And so far, we've looked at the problems that everyone faces and every business faces with their dollars. By understanding the problem, it helps us understand the process, which is banking, that causes the problem. And then we can understand what the product or tool to use to help solve that process. From there, we can understand how to use the product that's used for the process that overcomes that problem, that informs us of our perspective. The infinite banking concept is about building a strong foundation for our money system. James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, outlines that what allows for high degrees of success and high degrees of improvement to occur in virtually any setting is coming down to having a system in place. And that system should allow for continuous improvement. And when it comes to finances, you need to implement a foundational process or system that will allow, with the correct tool, that will allow your system to work in an optimal manner and allow for that continuous improvement. The infinite banking concept is one meaning a process that will allow for your money to flow in, create uninterrupted compounding, and will still allow you to use it and profit from all the other aspects of the banking process. The process of banking, as we've just covered, is not taught. Banking is the flow of money at a cost. And what's really important to understand is where that money flows first is ultimately a big part of what matters. It's really important to understand that the infinite banking concept is not an either-or approach. This is not a do this or do that scenario. The infinite banking concept is a foundational process that will allow you to take anything that you were already planning to do and help it be that much better. It's this foundational system that allows for, as we just mentioned, continuous improvement. So it still allows you to go do the things you were normally going to do, make the purchases you are going to make, and all of that still includes investments. So you can still go do the investments that you were looking to do already within your current strategy. It's going to take anything that you were already planning to do and allow you to make it better. In many respects, your bank is doing this with your money today already. It's just that you're potentially unaware of it. They're profiting from it. And thinking back to tools, ideally, if you owned your own bank, it would be the best place for you to put your own money. You'd be able to put it away in a safe position where it's going to, when you deposit it, it's going to be put to work. It would be lent out to others in which you would earn interest. You would receive dividends being a bank owner when the bank is profitable, and you would have access to the money or liquidity whenever you need it. That being said, let's talk about tools for a second. To practice the banking process, you need to use the right tool. I'm sure many of you who are listening to this use tools of some sort, whether that would be physical or software. And I'm quite positive that you would say that the right tool for the job really matters. And of course it does. It's really difficult to drive a nail with a screwdriver or cut tile with a handsaw or something along those lines. And that understanding is critical when it comes to not only understanding the infinite banking concept, but also for understanding the process of controlling the banking function. So let's do a quick thought exercise and think about the ideal characteristics of any money system. What would be some of the things that you would want that system to do for you? And what are the characteristics that you would want it to have? Perhaps it would be that it has consistent, strong returns, that it would not have any sort of market volatility, meaning that the compounding is always going one way. Perhaps that you would have access and liquidity, that it would have guarantees built in, that it's guaranteed to go upward. Maybe that it's inflation protected, that there's no penalties or fees when you need to access the money in your system. Probably that it's reputable, meaning that it's legal and there's no problems on that front. Also that it's private, that it's safe, and maybe even that there's creditor protection. So if somebody were to try to come after you, it's protected. And another couple of areas that are probably really important would be that it would be tax-free growth, in that as things grow, Uncle Sam can't take any more of it. And then when you transfer it over, meaning, eventually when you do pass, that ideal money system would transfer tax-free to the next generation. And then probably most important is that you would have full control of that system. I would think for most people, that would be the ideal money system. Now, I'm going to ask you, as a part of this thought exercise, do you think that there's any one tool that potentially provides all of these options that exist today? Are you aware of any single asset that offers all these options? Believe it or not, there is just one. And what we just described, as I was just speaking, is dividend paying whole life insurance with a mutual company. Now remember, this is a process, and this is the goal of recapturing and owning the banking process in our life. So the product you use, dividend paying whole life insurance, is the ideal tool for the job based upon all the criteria we saw, and after vetting all the different potential assets or tools available. And it's for these specific reasons, along with all those contractual levels of control and ownership, that we use it for the process of banking. Let's take a quick look at what this process and tool could be like in practice. So the infinite banking concept is about flowing your income or money first into a system you own. Then from there, you can leverage the cash value in the policy from the insurance company to purchase the items that you would anyway, which can include investments. You would be giving every dollar multiple jobs. So think back to money at work. This is putting money to work, and that's going to include guaranteed growth, death benefit protection, dividends, and the ability to access capital for your financial needs. So let's take a look at a few practical examples of how this works in process. So much like before, we start with our time being rewarded and we receive the same $10,000, so to speak. But now you're implementing the infinite banking concept and you're thinking long range, and you have a well-structured dividend paying whole life insurance policy as that foundational asset that you can build from within your financial system. And we're going to use it for the purposes of the infinite banking concept. So in this case, the same $10,000 flows in, and you're going to put that into the policy as premium. Then from there, you can borrow and purchase the things you were already going to purchase anyway. And in this case, over that same 30-year time frame, you would have been able to retain not only the $10,000, but because the money stays in the system, you also recoup close to $50,000 in growth due to the contractual guarantees, along with the dividends earned over that time frame, all of which will be available to you likely when you need it the next time most. Now, separately, if you're an honest banker and you repay those funds, you're also going to then have that money. And I think it's important to think about repayment as replenishment. So you're replenishing your capital, and you're still going to be able to go do things in the future, like investments or purchasing income producing assets of some sort. So let's maybe take a look at a more specific example of how this works as well. Let's look at this more specific example in detail. So let's consider the situation from earlier, and you're earning $150,000 post-tax. We're saving approximately 8% of your income, and we're creating this banking system by redirecting our savings into a system we own and control. We can see that by age 50 or 15 years in, we've capitalized about $180,000 of our own money. And by age 50, at the same time, we have access to over $232,000 in cash value. Now, at that same time, because that money is doing multiple jobs, we also have $631,000 in guaranteed death benefit for our heirs at that point. Now, what's also important to call out is that $12,000 in premium, if it goes into the system, because we're now moving past this onto this right side of the compounding curve, we are now gaining access. So 12,000 in, we now have $22,000 that 12,000 generated in that one policy year. So that for every $1 that went in at around age 50, it's generating $1.83 in tax-free dollars for every one of those dollars going forward. And that's just the beginning. So let's take a look at age 70. We now see that the cash value has expanded to nearly $972,000, and the uninterrupted compounding is really going at this point. And we can see that the in-year cash value increase from that premium, so every $1 in at this point has generated $3.76 in available cash value. So that's pretty amazing when we consider at age 70, people are needing to take some sort of passive income or guaranteed passive income. This is an opportunity to help alleviate some of that pressure that we feel in our passive income years. Now, it's important to call out that, yes, we've capitalized $419,000 of our own money, but we have nearly $972,000 available to us. That also being stated, we also have $1.3 million in death benefit available to us at that particular point in time as well. So in this scenario, it's really important to understand that we did not spend any more money than we would have anyway. So all we did was change where we are putting money and where we're warehousing our money. And in the course of that, we are also in a situation where we could have gone and used those funds for other things all along the way, paying down some of those expenses, paying off some of those other bills perhaps that we have. And now some people are going to say, but I could have got more in the markets or whatever. And maybe you'd be right. That's plausible. However, what's something else? What's the unseen of that? The capital's locked away for decades. There's no access to it. It's not guaranteed, nor would you have any sort of death benefit if you put the money there first. Now, remember, this is not an either or approach. So somebody who is accumulating these level of cash values, couldn't they simply have redirected some of that cash value to investments? Of course they could. And they could have even found different types of investments available that are generating more income all along the way. So let's scale this out a little bit further as well. And let's consider what happens if we were to look at expanding the system. So now that you're starting to see these advantages, let's say you want to expand the system some. And I assume most people are accustomed to paying annual home and auto insurance, property taxes, those types of things within their financial world. Let's say that hopefully you're getting, if you're working in a W-2 job, or even if you're a small business owner, you're giving yourself a raise of some sort. Let's say that you only took half of that raise, and we're just going to say it's very minimal. It's only 2% a year. And we're going to put that in for the first 7 years up to age 42. And we're going to first redirect those home and auto insurance, the property taxes. We're going to first put those into the system as a premium the first year. And then from there, we'll just repay those loans over the course of the year and replenish the system, keeping the money in our hands, so to speak, for the long run. So looking at expanding the system, we see some pretty big differences to our last example, don't we? So we have $339,000 available now at age 50, which is nearly $100,000 more. And we have over $300,000 more in death benefit than the last example at the same period of time. And a significantly larger amount of annual cash value growth at $32,600 in year 15, just in that single year. Now, again, it's important to remember, we didn't spend any more money to this point. We simply redirected where the money went first. And if we scale out to age 70, yet again, we see even larger growth, even larger situational changes that have occurred of $1.44 million available in cash value, nearly $2 million in death benefit, and an in-year cash value growth of $81,600. So you simply redirected where your money went to first and kept more of your money in your own system. So in closing, or as we wrap up towards the end here, I want to give you a few nuggets to chew on and really think about that you can take away and consider, talk about with your spouse or what have you, as you think about this concept. And the first of those is that remember that there's only two sources of income: money at work and people at work. And most people don't give money multiple jobs. And that is what the infinite banking concept is doing. It is putting money to work, and it's a simple one-step change in the process or the flow of money through our hands that produces multiple jobs for our money, giving it work to do to work for you. Secondly, is the principle that Nelson calls out at the end of Becoming Your Own Banker of if you knew at passive income time that you would be getting back everything that you put into a system, would you object to putting more money into it? And the reason he's asking that is the way that dividend paying whole life insurance works is not only will you get everything paid into the system back, but likely significantly more due to the contractually guaranteed growth and dividends that are going to occur along the way. And again, it's not about spending more, it's about earning on a larger volume of money that's flowing through your hands anyway. The third point here is that when you get paid for your work, you're currently putting all of it into somebody else's bank. So if you were fine putting all of your money under somebody else's control today, wouldn't you perhaps, or wouldn't you think that the choice is simple to put it into your own banking system if you had a system in place? Just a thought to consider. The next one here is that when the government creates a problem, meaning onerous taxation, and then offers you a solution to the problem that they created, aren't you a little bit suspicious that you're being manipulated? And that's a question Nelson likes to challenge us with when we think about some of these different things that are available to us. And you think about all the different tax qualified plans that are out there: 401ks, 403bs, 429s, Roth IRAs, all of that stuff. They're all there to solve a problem that the government actually created. So just something to chew on, something to think about. Next point here is that wealth must reside someplace. And wouldn't you want that to be in an environment that you own and control, or you at least have more control over? Because most places that people are putting money today, they actually have very little control over. So why wouldn't you want to be the one who benefits from all aspects of the different transactions that take place within your lifetime? Then lastly, you finance everything you buy. I said this earlier, that this is probably the most important point to take away from this overview, in that you either are going to give up interest to somebody else, or you are going to forever give away that interest that the money could have earned. And there are no exceptions to this rule. You're always borrowing either from your future self or from somebody else. So as I wrap up today, take a moment and think about what you earned today in a year. Now multiply that over the remaining years of your lifetime, your working years that you have left. It's okay to round. You don't have to be a math genius. Write it down. Actually take some time and be like, what amount of money flows through my hands each year? What is that going to look like over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years? And then re-ask yourself that question. Now that you're going to be beginning to see that there's a system, a potential solution for you to retain more of that income that flows through your hands, how much of that do you want to keep? How much of that do you want to hold on to over the course of that time frame? That's what I would really challenge you to think about here. Now, with this overview today, my aim is to make some of these concepts that Nelson Nash laid out in Becoming Your Own Banker maybe a little bit easier to understand. Not that it's difficult. I think the book is great at outlining a lot of these things, and there's still a lot of great value to take in reading the book. So when we think about next steps in the process, I highly recommend getting a copy of Becoming Your Own Banker. I have links to that in the notes here for this video. If you'd like to pick up a copy there, you can also get in touch with me. I can send you a copy directly. We can do Venmo, whatever works for you. Doesn't matter, but just so that you can get a copy of this book in your hands and read it. That is where the value truly lies. It's important to remember that the Becoming Your Own Banker book was the workbook for a 10-hour seminar that Nelson used to do. And with any process or any concept, it's important to always go to the source. And the Nelson Nash Institute, that's why I became affiliated with them, is because Nelson Nash is the originator of the concept, and the Nelson Nash Institute, the progenitor of this concept going forward. And that's something I wanted to be involved with. And that's one of the reasons why I became an infinite banking concept practitioner. So once you've had a chance to read the book, let's set up some time together. Let's really dig in and explore some of the specifics in your particular situation and look at a plan and a strategy that would allow you to achieve all the things that you want to be able to do. And we can make that customized to your specific situation. So reach out to the information below and set up some time, and let's continue this conversation forward. I hope this was really valuable for you today. Please feel free to reach out to me for questions. You may have had some come up. There's a lot of great questions that a lot of people who have both done this with me live as well as those who have watched it on the video have already provided back. But let's answer those questions together. Let's take a look at it and see what we can do to help get you on your way to understanding so that you can make the best decisions that work for your particular situation. Thanks again. I really appreciate your time for watching this, and I hope to hear from you soon.